So how do these modern day offices look? Let's run through them real quick, and then we'll go to 1 Corinthians 12, 13, and 14, and look at a verse in each chapter. He says, and he gave the apostles. Why did he give the apostles? To equip the saints. How does a modern day apostle look? A modern day apostle would be a leader to the leaders, a pastor to the pastor, right? He would be an overseer of churches, right? Not just planting churches, but overseeing them, making sure that the pastors and leaders were good and healthy. A modern day prophet, what would a modern day prophet look like? Well, a modern day prophet is more than just a pastor, more than just a preacher. A modern day prophet has an unusually sharp message, perhaps for encouragement, most often for correction, to get the church back on track. There are some, I would think, like a A.W. Tozer or a Ravenhill. I would look at those as prophets. Now, they might not call themselves that when they were alive. Maybe today, a modern prophet, I would look at like a message of a Paul Washer as modern day prophecy, to get the church in line, to get the church to pay attention. Although he probably doesn't call himself one. In fact, that's an interesting point. Most apostles and prophets, they don't have business cards that say, hi, I'm Apostle Jim and I'm Prophet Joe. So, you know, if you see on Facebook somebody says, I'm Apostle Steve Smith, usually they don't announce themselves as apostles and prophets. Usually other people will tell them that they think they are because they have these gifts. That's just a side note. But that's what a modern day apostle and a prophet would look like. They would be protecting the church and giving special messages to the church to equip the saints for the work of ministry. The evangelist is to equip the church, equip the saints so they know how to evangelize better. The shepherd and the teacher would be looking over the flock to make sure the flock is healthy, to make sure the flock is being fed meat, not milk, to make sure the flock isn't digesting false teaching, to call out false teachers. 1 Timothy, that's clearly the pastor's job. Why? So that the saints are equipped to do the work of ministry. That's what the offices are for, to equip the saints. Because I think we fall into the ditch in the churches sometimes where the people in the pews don't realize that they're the ones who are supposed to do the work of the ministry. Not the apostles, not the prophets, not the evangelists, not the shepherds and teachers. They are there to equip the saints. All right, so with that being said, I want to back up what I said a little bit about apostles and prophets. Again, I think verse 13 hits it, until we attain the unity of the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. We're not there yet, so these offices are still open. From there, we go to 1 Corinthians 13:8. Listen to what Paul says. Paul says, love never ends. As for prophecies, yeah, they will fade away. They will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. Verse 10, 1 Corinthians 13:10. But when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. Has the perfect come yet? No. Now remember, when Paul wrote this, Christ had already risen, of course. He's talking about the perfect coming back, Jesus Christ. When the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. Until then, there will be prophecy, there will be tongues, and there will be knowledge. After all, we don't stop seeking knowledge, do we? So why would we stop seeking tongues and prophecy? It's a shame that we let all these false teachers ruin it for us. Prophecy exists. Charles Haddon Spurgeon experienced prophecy. I just read a blog from Piper. He experienced prophecy. I've had times in the prison. One time the Lord woke me up at 3:30 in the morning and I wrote something down. I had one of my favorite prisoners. He was going to leave to another prison in Florida for 17 years. I was sad. He was bummed out. He was scared. He was going to a hardcore prison. The Lord woke me up and gave me something to write down. I wrote it down, debated whether I was going to share it with him, prayed whether I was going to share it with him, and I did share it with him, and you know what happened? He opened up his Bible, he started crying, and he had shown me some passages that he highlighted, and at the top of his Bible, he wrote down almost identical what I wrote down. It wasn't verbatim, word for word, but it was thought for thought. Clearly, the Lord had given me a word to encourage this fella. That's happened a couple other times in the prison. Prophecy is definitely alive, and this office of prophet and And apostle is definitely alive. By the way, I don't think I'm a prophet just because I got a word of prophecy. No, I just think God can do anything. Those things are not dead today. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 14. Listen to what Paul says about prophets. He says, let 2 or 3 prophets speak, and let the others weigh what is said. So let people prophesy. Chew it up. Compare it to the word. Is it real or not? Is it true or not? Don't just negate it and say, that's not for today. Test it. Test prophecy. 1 Thessalonians says that too. And look what he says in 1 Corinthians 14:39. This is important, guys. So, my brothers, earnestly desire prophecy, and do not forbid speaking in tongues, but all things should be done decently and in order. So if people are praying in tongues, unbiblically, get away. That's wrong. If they're just babbling around in churches without an interpreter and more than one at a time, no, that's wrong. And if people are desiring to prophesy, guess what? That's what we're supposed to do. We are supposed to earnestly desire prophecy. We should be praying for it. Now listen to this. This is 1 Corinthians 12, 28 through 31. This is where I'm going to leave you today. And God appointed in the church first apostles, second prophets, third teachers, then miracles, then gifts of healing, helping and ministrating in various kinds of tongues. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Do all work miracles? Do all possess gifts of healing? Do all speak in tongues? Do all interpret? No, of course not. Not everybody should speak in tongues. Not everyone should prophesy, because we're not all the hand. We are the body. We all have different parts. Therefore, we have different gifts. But listen to what Paul says here in verse 31. But earnestly desire the higher gifts. Paul's saying, if you're going to desire a gift, if you're going to pray to God for a gift, pray for one of the higher gifts. What does that mean? Well, in verses 28 through 29, he lists them in descending order of importance to the body of Christ. Remember, gifts aren't for us to look holy. Gifts aren't to draw attention to us. Gifts are for one reason, to build up the body of Christ. That's why he gives gifts. Not for our glory, for his glory. Not to embellish our power, to show his power and to build up the church. And here's what he says. Earnestly desire the higher gifts. What are the higher gifts? Well, he lists apostles first, prophets second, and third teachers, and so on and so forth. Desire the higher gifts. If you're going to pray for a gift, pray for the gift of apostle or prophet or teacher or miracles or gift of healing. That's what Paul's saying here. You can't really, I don't understand how people can read 1 Corinthians 12, 13, and 14 and think that these gifts are done away with. Just because there's a ton of false teachers, and guess what? The closer we get to Christ's return, the more false teachers and false prophets and false apostles there's going to be. But that doesn't mean that the office is closed. That doesn't mean these gifts are done away with. These gifts will not be done away with until the perfect comes. And the perfect is coming. The perfect is coming. In fact, we see that in verse 10. When the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. Until then, these gifts are for today, and we should pray for them. We should pray for the gift of prophecy. All right, peace.